thanks. Yeah, so our media communication department said I must show up at conference and say something. So I hope it's going to be interesting. Yeah, so I guess I was appointed in this role about 2.5 years ago, Chief Data Analytics Officer. The customer facing, obviously, it's F&B, but it's really across the first rank group. So I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of the way that we see the evolution. I think you have seen some interesting or heard some interesting things about AI before, so I hope it's not going to be repetitive. But while obviously I'm in banking, I mean, we'll show you really the impacts across industry. So it impacts our clients, and I think that's something that we also find very interesting to see how we can assist with that. We're going to talk a bit about the structure in the group. So like I said, Chief Data Analytics Officer, I always tell people we either give people fancy titles, we can pay them more money. And we went for the fancy titles. So we actually we've probably got 25 CDAOs in the group now. But I'll explain a bit when I get to it. I'll explain why is that? Why do we think that is different from, I don't know, let's say, people that traditionally run data or BI, etc. I'll talk a bit about generative AI because I think it is a huge game changer, as you've all seen, and I guess almost everybody put up their hands and been playing with ChatGPT, etc. So I'll focus a little bit on what are the kind of use cases that we're looking at and that we think is going to be all going to be game changers. I'll talk a bit about the end, about the summary and what's next. Okay, so before I get to AI itself, I guess it is instructive to just look at what the capital markets are saying about technology. So if you look at the S&P 500 and the composition of the companies that make up the S&P 500, and you look at what portion of their market capitalization is driven by tangible assets versus what is driven by what is the resultant. That's not necessarily intangible. What they should be in was a big company, but even IBM was really, also had lots of physical assets. Exxon, Procter & Gamble, GE, 3M was a mining company back then. They did reinvent themselves to become a bit of a different company. But the third industrial revolution and the fourth industrial revolution has changed things where companies are able to leverage technology, can get a significant multiple in value from the earnings, but also a significant multiple to their tangible assets. This is not priced to book this ratio because I guess a lot of companies have intangibles that they have on their balance sheet. Okay, but still, I think the point is if you look at the value creation that especially US firms have gotten from this, and I guess the US have really looked after their big companies very well. I think in South Africa, we unfortunately probably in a little bit of a different situation with government, but our competition, if we think about it, is actually not just domestic. It is really that these big firms are becoming more powerful than governments in many cases, and I think it's quite important that we remain competitive. And if we're not using and leveraging technology, you can imagine that even like us as a bank, we will become plumbing for other people that will really own the customer relationship, that will direct the payments, that will figure out who to lend to, and that is I guess the existential threat that the rest of the world has. And Europe is actually in a pretty bad position as well. If you look at this picture for Europe, the ratios are significantly lower. They have not been able to monetize technology into their economies. So that's just a bit of food for thought. And now, is this it's just a bubble? Again, when you talk about stock prices, like when Apple, Microsoft, not Alphabet yet, but the first two are at all-time highs. Amazon is pretty much there. NVIDIA is a new entrant into that. NVIDIA is trading at 60 times tangible assets. It's insane. Okay, right? You know, guys, you know who NVIDIA is, right? So all this generative AI that you're running is running on chips that are manufactured. By and large, NVIDIA is, let's say, the biggest player in that. So why is this happening? And really, I guess this is actually an old slide. I didn't have to tell you that. But this is when I got my job. There was a couple of slides that I showed our strat code to say that investing in data analytics is not a one-off, and it's not a bubble, because these things there's always a bit of a crash at some point in time, and then it recovers. The main point here is that this shift to data and analytics it is inevitable and it's unstoppable. So 3 trends there. If you look at the first one, Moore's law has been holding for 120 years. So Gordon Moore he wrote what was then later attributed to become Moore's law in 1960, and I think there was like 90 transistors on an integrated circuit when he did that. And today you're sitting at tens of billions. So I guess he predicted that the transistor density, the number of transistors that you can fit on an integrated circuit, would double every, let's say, 18 months. That has held true for a very, very long time. And people then extended it back in time from the 1960s to the early mechanical computers. And I guess my original background was electronic engineer. I didn't work on microelectronics per se, but the point is that the ability to still make faster chips is still there, and to make these chips less expensive. And today, I guess we have the added factor. It's not just the cost of landing a chip, because these NVIDIA, they're not for no reason the 5th largest company in the world, is really the architectures of building chips that can run artificial intelligence algorithms is really what is driving this industry. So before that it was Bitcoin, and before that it was gaming, right? But the fact is, these things are becoming faster, and there's a lot more of it, and it's on demand, in the web, immediately available, etc. So I think that's the one big trend, is computational power. The second one is really the growth of data. So if all this computing power is useless if you don't have data. And like in our case as well, getting your data sorted out, getting it in a platform where it's accessible, where it's interoperable, that is a big, big task of what we need to do. And then the third factor, which is people, I think, underestimate over time, is really algorithmic improvement. And I'll talk a bit about algorithmic improvement on the next slide. So when I started working in this field, I guess that when I was 21, we were programming artificial neural networks. So that was I know this is a slide from Microsoft, but I guess machine learning is a bit older than 1997, but not that much older. I'm not giving away too much of my age, but training multi-layer neural networks to do classification problems was already in play back then. But things have significantly improved from that period. Deep learning was really the next big development. Deep learning allowed, let's say, neural networks to be trained to recognize specific patterns, whether that's in speech or in vision, and that really lifted the game for all kinds of image and speech recognition tasks. At the same time, something that's not really mentioned here is reinforcement learning that came out, and DeepMind really did significant work in that field as well. So you've all seen the Alpha Zeros, the Alpha Goes, basically the computers, the algorithms that train themselves within a few hours to play chess, and then beats the best, not the best chess player, but the best chess machine out there that experts have been, hundreds of people have been working on to train. That's really, I guess, that was the previous generation. And what we've seen basically since November, December this year, last year, is really generative AI making a leapfrog. Now, even generative AI is not really, is probably the first, let's say, the transformative, no pun intended, paper on this, on transformers was really written in 2017. And that's really when that started to take off. But recently in the bank, we've got lots of people with PhDs, even PhDs in AI. And when we do training, internal training on generative artificial intelligence, I say, well, tell one of my colleagues, Mark, but you've got quite a few people here, PhDs, can they give us training on generative AI? And they say, no, their PhDs are dated because they got them 5 years ago or longer. So unfortunately, they missed the latest wave. So I don't know if it makes you feel better or worse, but we're all in this era where we actually have to learn some new tricks, because things have actually changed quite a lot. But I'll tell you a bit later on. A lot of this stuff is not that hard to use. That's one of the big advantages of generative AI. It is, you do not need to have a PhD in artificial intelligence to use this stuff. But there's still, I think, a lot of more common sense. We always say there's artificial intelligence and natural stupidity. If you can just avoid the latter, you should still be able to use the stuff. But so on AI, I guess one of the firms have done a lot of work in classifying or working with their clients to understand the value in AI. Is McKinsey. So they've got some great articles on the topic across, and what is the impact of AI versus traditional analytics across different fields. So we look at this and we say, look, we're definitely in banking, we're in insurance, and we're also in telco. I mean, I guess very proud of the business that we have. So my phone says F&B, right? So F&B Connect. I don't know if any of you use that. So we have basically a mobile virtual network operator. We actually won Best MVNO of the World award earlier in the year. So that was, but in fairness, we're pretty small in telco. Okay, but we like to play with different things. But all our clients in all of these other industries are also highly impacted by AI. And AI in many of these can give a significant lift over traditional methods. And let me at the outset say, in the bank, we are actually quite traditionalist. Like our scoring and capital models, these things are so highly regulated, you can't just go and plug in AI. That's one of the big, let's say, things holding that back. On the other side, I'll talk a bit later about some of the things that you can use AI for in banking that are not as regulated, and where maybe the concerns around the ethics, etc., is not as extreme. We're not where it is easier to deploy these solutions. But certainly, we think that this is really something that's going to impact everybody. It's not just in financial services, and frankly, actually, some areas look more impacted than financial services. In terms of the strategy that my area has across the group for data analytics, we focus on three, let's say, value horizons. The first one there is just to be better at financial services. And people say, but isn't that a very simple strategy? Shouldn't you have more complicated strategy for what you do? But it actually aligns our teams perfectly with what the business wants. So what we say is, look here, what the bank wants is actually very simple. We want to target customers. We want to cross-sell to customers. We want to optimize the cost of delivering to customers. And then we've got the other C's, which are very big in the analytics space, and that is really credit, crime, which is really fraud and fin crime, and capital. And those are all the big levers in business. If you can pull those levers, those are really what matters. We do add conduct and communications to it as well, but they're not, I guess, financial levers. They're really obviously there from a reputational governance perspective. So what do we do in my area? And okay, by the way, we have, I'll cover that probably in the next slide, we have 1,900 people in our data analytics community. So it's actually, we have a bit of an army. People always tell me, how can you have so many staff? Okay, but we have a complex environment, I guess, to manage. So what we do is we build foundational group data products that can be used across the bank. So in the main, what does a bank do? Okay, a bank does transactions. So we process about 2.5 billion transactions a year to the value of 50 trillion rand. Because 50 trillion, if it sounds like a big number, it is. It's probably 7 times South Africa's GDP. But that's just transfers between accounts or transfers going out of the bank. That is not receipts. Receipts is pretty much similar, because otherwise, we would blow up, right? If we just hold the money. So that's probably one of our biggest data assets. Our team that builds the payment classification system actually won our innovation prize in in the bank. So there was like a 2 million rand prize that they got, which was quite nice. So that's really building data assets is a key part of the strategy. Okay, so that was on the transaction side. And we lend money. We lend about 1 trillion rand in South Africa. If you look at the overall group, including our UK business, all the more, broader Africa, about 1.5 trillion rand of lending. Then we take deposits, and it probably wouldn't surprise you, deposits is pretty much close to matching that. So again, so we're 1 trillion rand of deposits that we take in South Africa. And then we have an insurance business. I guess I always say, well, we used to, in FirstRand, we used to have the Discovery Momentum and our insurance as part of the group since they were divested just over a decade ago. We then got our own insurance licenses, long-term and short-term. And I think we've now got a pretty solid insurance business. So again, more than 1 trillion rand of sum assured that we have in that business, and is growing quite nicely because we can feed it off data. So we can build models that predict mortality and fraud and other behavioral aspects of customers. So that's really, we try to see ourselves, at least I position ourselves internally, that we are really a data analytics driven business. Even if our most profitable month of the year is always December, when the whole management team goes, everybody's on leave. And that's the proof that actually the bank is run by automated systems that are hopefully doing things smartly. But what we do say is that this business of banking and financial services is actually under long-term threat. So if you look at ROEs of banks globally, actually there is very little EVA or economic value added created by banks. The ROEs are trading at pretty much what the target rates are, cost of capital is. And if you look at the price to book ratios, I showed you those eye-watering numbers for the US, banks globally trade at very close to book value. So there is almost, the markets don't assign any value to banks, any future value. They think banks are going to be commoditized and are going to be, part of history. It doesn't mean banks are unsafe. It just means that it's not exciting. It's not an exciting future to look at. So you have to, or we believe you have to think about, data as a business. So to uncommoditize the bank, and really the kind of levers that you have there is you have to be able to give customers advice. You've heard some of that this morning as well, from some of the other speakers. If you can't give customers integrated, trusted advice, and if you can't deliver that through a platform where it's not just dependent on an opinion or even the training of an individual, then you're going to be behind. And that's not just for retail customers, that's for small businesses that are at different stages of startup, for more mature enterprises, multinationals, etc. And there's a range of, let's say, client advisory tools that we deploy for customers, and that we think really gives us a bit of a differentiation. Then we look at also externalizing some of our internal skills. That is somewhat more tricky, but often we can do that with areas like government, etc. They like us to be able to run models for them that predict whether they have got ghost employees or all kinds of funny things. So that's but then there's a lot that can be done in that space. And then the last one, is a bit of we have got this X squared strategy where the bank aims to be a player in marketplace and ecosystems. And I think if you've seen what people are projecting, that marketplace ecosystems will constitute something like $60 trillion of value by 2025. So now that's close to half of the global economy. That's quite big. So if you are not part of these ecosystems, then they will have other partners and they will basically bypass you. So they're really developing strong data assets that can support plays into those is something that we look at. Okay, so then I will tell you a bit more about our CBAOs. So that's why the way that we look at the group is we split it in the customer segments, so retail, commercial, corporate, institutional. That's really RMB, where retail is really F&B and Westbank, a little bit of direct taxes as Burton as well. Commercial is really F&B, and then in broader Africa we're trading typically under F&B, but RMB plays there as well, and then we have a bank in the UK. And then we group the activities in a way that makes sense for data. Like I said before, it's easy when you transact. Transact is a huge pillar, and it's a big source of data for the other areas. But lend, invest, insure, all of these are, let's say, $1 trillion, a trillion rand, let's say, either asset or liability or coverage businesses. So all of them have got significant data that underpin their ability to do those risk-taking activities. First ID is really a view of customer, but not just customer, but prospects, employees, related parties, etc. And then interactions, we have more than 2 billion streaming interactions a month onto a platform which we can build real-time triggers and events that can get customers, that can help customers in various situations, etc. And then our functional areas, they are huge consumers of all the internal data. Typically, they used to source their data directly from systems, so there's massive duplication, underlying data sets. So what we really do is we try to create a single data architecture. I didn't go into the technical details of this discussion really, but we have now got the vast bulk of our internal data on a single platform, and we are therefore able to build unified data products that are interoperable and that can really leverage the strengths of all of these different areas on a single platform. So I guess quite an aggressive, but to be honest, quite aggressive vision for what one can do with data and analytics. Okay, then I'll take a bit of a step back, talk a bit about generative AI. Okay, so luckily I think Paul this morning he scared you into all the bad stuff about generative AI. Luckily I don't have to go into that too much. I think just generative AI, I mean the reason, like I said before, the stuff is so disruptive because it can easily be deployed. It's easily, people understand it easily. It can integrate large language skills. It can actually do coding. Those of you who have played with the stuff, and whether you like Python or Java or even COBOL or whatever, it's actually pretty amazing. But it doesn't necessarily know your internal libraries and then all the image and sound capabilities. I think, and really, I guess this is the kind of use cases. This is a bit of a Microsoft example. Customer contact center, search and QA, code generation, document intelligence. These are the kind of applications that I guess everybody is trying to develop and improve using these tools. Okay, but as you've seen, I guess there's a couple of major concerns with generative AI. So if I could list a couple of them and how one addresses it. Firstly, I mean, obviously you know that the stuff that you type into ChatGPT is effectively public record. So they don't really protect the data. It can be taken, it can be used by the model to train itself, and then later on when someone else asks something, they might be able to see what you had actually used there. So clearly that's a big issue. That's an even bigger issue if you have got privacy, or if you've got personally identifiable information. That's typically you need to have a policy in your organization that says thou shalt not use any IP or PII in any of the public generative AI tools, right? I mean, hopefully you've got that right. Then I think the third thing, once you've addressed that, so you've got, maybe you're going to use a private instance so that you can actually protect the data that goes into it, and that Microsoft itself promises not to use to train their engines, right? Unfortunately, we are a bit at the mercy of these big multinational corporations, so that is really, I guess you can protect the environment as well as you want, right? But that's hosted on a zero cloud, and if you're smart, you're controlling where they can host it even, so that it is in a region which you have the right legal recourse if they screw it up. But still then, you have to understand these models were trained on hundreds of billions of text items that were sourced on the internet. So there's a bit of Wikipedia in that. I personally find Wikipedia to be very accurate. My children tell me, well, when they were in high school still, and two of them still are, they tell me that Wikipedia is inaccurate. You can't use any of that data. And I'm like, but there isn't a better source, and now there's actually GTP4. So I want to see the teacher or even the professor that's going to argue with some of the information coming out of there, because the stuff is pretty powerful information. But the point is, if your customer asks a question that relates to a product inside your bank or a process inside the bank, that information was not publicly available and typically has not been assimilated into that thing. So it actually can't answer factual questions on your own system. So you really have to be able to train it with your own data. Now there's a couple of ways to do that. So and I guess just prompt engineering is important, but prompt engineering is not good enough if it doesn't know the answer to how your specific process works. We always find that it's actually ironic. I tell people, when you ask it, okay, so on the F&B app, how do you do this and that? You ask ChatGPT or GPT-4. It will give you an answer. It will tell you, you click there, and then we're like, wow, that's really smart. It's too bad we didn't build it that way, right? Maybe we should have built it that way. We didn't have that functionality there, because what is it doing? It's not lying per se, it's just generalizing over all the data that's been fed, right? That's what these models do. They generalize. So the point is, if you want to train it on your own data, you have to take a corpus. I'm sorry, this slide does look pretty small. But you basically have to take your own corpus of data and you feed it through a process that we call embedding, that basically vectorizes the text. So you give it text documents, etc. It indexes, splits it, and vectorizes it so that it can form part of the solution space. And when somebody asks this thing a question, it actually finds that answer that is specific to your company, and then it can easily assimilate that and put it in a nice sentence or paragraph and give it back. Okay, so that's how we basically do the internal data. Now, whether that's facing a customer or whether that's facing our own internal staff. I don't know if you're like us, you have thousands of policies in your organizations. Maybe you're all lucky, you don't have such a zoo. But okay, so that is really, I guess, compliance documents, HR documents, whatever, rules, whatever, guidelines, everything, okay. Making that, is there anybody that actually knows all of that stuff? Even, I always found it challenging for staff. There was at one time I was the CEO of consumer, so I had 17,000 staff reporting to me, including all the branches and everything. And I always felt sorry for the poor staff that have to memorize, not memorize, but they have to know thousands of pages of documents. And if they screw something up, there's consequences. So this is really, I guess, something that really AI can be very useful for people to understand what they need to do. Okay, that's a bit about embeddings and just addressing, let's say, the big weaknesses. So the lack of privacy, the lack of protection of your own intellectual property, and then the accuracy of these systems. You have to address those if you're going to deploy any solutions based on them. I guess just to quote another one, in terms of use cases, so I didn't list all our use cases in excruciating detail, but what you can find publicly is actually some pretty good guidance on what are the main use cases in generative AI. Now this is specifically generative AI. So McKinsey estimate that generative AI adds 3 to 4 trillion rand to the economy, and that's, I guess, if you add that to what they already had in AI, then that is like, I think it's 11 to 18 trillion rand to the world economy. I think somebody showed the Goldman Sachs number this morning. They said 7% of global GDP. This number is actually, pretty much almost double that. Now, who is right? Who knows? But is it going to have a huge, huge impact on global GDP? Yes. And that's why that very first slide that I showed you, the run that we've seen in those stocks that are really the main beneficiaries from this technology is immense. And hopefully, I guess, some of our companies will also get some benefit from it. But okay, be that as it may. So what this chart is really impact is the percentage of the functional spend and the impact in hundreds of billions of dollars. Customer operations, okay, clearly. So basically, let's chatbots and search functionality exposed to customers. That is a no-brainer for this stuff. This stuff is, the models are really good at understanding what people say. Okay, I know what people say, well, but it doesn't actually understand anything, does it? Well, I think it's a moot issue. can it take the words that you're typing and can it find other words that very accurately describe what should follow your question? If you had phrased it as a question, yes, it can do that. Can you make it give an answer that is relevant to your organization? Yes, that's what I was telling you before. So it really it can really do these things very good. And I guess okay, we have not deployed the generative AI solutions yet, but obviously I guess the current generation that we have is still running on AWS Kendra. There's nobody from AWS here. But when we speak to AWS, they're like very worried about what Microsoft's doing, right? So like they are working really hard to upgrade. This is a war now, it's what it is. They are really working hard to improve their functionality because I guess they always thought that they were actually the leaders in the space of deploying automated machine learning solutions. Okay. Personalized communication and advice. Really in the sales and marketing space, sales and marketing, if you didn't think that that worked on a segment of one, it is really getting to a segment of one now. So yes, your TV ads and maybe your billboards, but even if people are not watching TV anymore, they're watching Netflix, right? So what Netflix is showing you on streaming channels, doesn't matter which ones you like, they can personalize what they are showing you. If they are doing ads on your phone or on the web browsers, etc., it's already personalized. Whether it's accurately or well done is a different issue, but is it personalized? Absolutely. And then the same on the bank platforms and the communication that you give to your customers. Actually, ironically here, we build this stuff. Our challenge is getting marketing to sign off on the stuff we built. Because if you think about it, the heads of marketing are not they're not like the engineers or the data scientists. So we have to convince them that the stuff we're generating, their customers will like it a lot more than the stuff that they were writing by hand. So write the marketing script and stuff. I mean, you can't write marketing script across. Let's say we have 120 products on Google. Marketing can't keep up with that demand that we can. Okay, then code assist I mentioned. So we run very, very big coding areas. I guess and some of you, many of you work for vendors that sell stuff to us, etc. I mean, we like to be quite self-sufficient. So we have huge armies that code. Maybe we write too much code ourselves, but I mean, I guess in a way this is an advantage for us that we can actually now improve the efficiency of coding because, like I said, these models don't just do Shakespeare and whatever English very well. They also do Java and Python and COBOL, etc. Now, that stuff that you probably want to deploy in your own integrated development environment. You want to train it bespoke, tailored to your own libraries, etc. Those are the kind of things that we would. Okay. Well, we lost time. It only took 2 minutes. Okay, then really the staff productivity tools. Okay, I think those are ones that you pretty much can get from any vendor. So this is really, I guess, some of the big things we're working on. Okay, then I'll go on to summary. I guess so. What are some of the big things that we're trying to do now? I think our data product development, model governance, and ethics for AI. We actually have to lift to the next level. This morning you saw lines of defense and all of that. On model governance, we actually have 5 levels of where this stuff gets improved. From a business unit, a segment, technical committees, deployment committee, etc. On AI, if you're going to do AI, use AI for credit scoring, for insurance scoring, etc. As a bank, at least, lots of scrutiny on that to make sure that you're addressing the fairness and bias elements. Ethics for AI is a very big topic. I guess some of the other areas are a little bit easier. If you're doing offer optimization, it's probably less of it's less of an ethical issue, etc. And then obviously, I think the new tools give us ability to further develop a lot of what we already have. So in some areas, I would say we're pretty advanced in AI. Financial crime, if you have heard of state capture and all of those things, right? So I guess reporting and profiling customers, reporting to the FIC, etc., to try to keep the country safe and whatever else. That we are generating probably in excess of 100,000 reports via AI that gets sent to the regulator. I always say, I hope the regulator's got proper AI people there, because I mean, we are generating this stuff for them. Whether they read it or can read it, I mean, that's okay. But I can't really answer that question here. I think we don't have FIC, etc. here. I think then our platform capabilities. Who of you are operating on-prem versus who's still operating on-prem? No. Just I mean the mix of things. Who's operating? The rest of you operating in cloud. Who's in cloud? Okay, it's hybrid. I think that makes a lot of sense. So we've hybridized, and I think a lot of the new stuff you want to operate in cloud just because it's easier. I mean, maintaining the complexity of the software stack to maintain, then also the spinning up of these environments to do the computational loads and stuff. You are just plowing. That very first chart that you saw about the tangible assets, right? You're building more, you want to build more data centers and tangible assets, and have a lot more kit in it, etc. So I guess that's where the cloud is really a huge enabler for it. Even the skill of supporting these, whether you're using infrastructure as a service or software as a service, etc., platform as a service, the cloud is a big enabler. And then I think the last thing is really about people. Okay, so we say when you talk about AI, it's still about people. The AIs don't train themselves, etc. We really getting the right skill sets of people. I think we still in South Africa, the educational system is a huge problem, but the universities are still churning out really good grads. And if we take them, there was a guy here, Michael from Canada. So it was like I was telling him, he's taking our people, right? So hopefully we keep our best people here and not send them to Netherlands and wherever else, because I think we just have to remain competitive. And then AI literacy is a big topic, because I guess that is really getting the workforce used to the fact that there's going to be AI assistance for them in their various tasks, and getting them to actually want it to make them more efficient and productive. Okay, I guess that was it. Any questions? Thanks.
There's a question on my side. So you speak up front around a lot of the line of business AI stuff that's being done. Is there any particular tools you're using, or does it vary depending on some of those things that come down in terms of the silos? What are you using to? I mean, obviously you've got a big data science team.
Yeah.
And you're building models around. But what are you doing from an artificial intelligence point of view?
Okay, so we use a range of tools. Like I said, a lot of the production deployment stuff now is still running on AWS. So that would be like the Lex Kendras and stuff, but basically, and even Redshift for model deployment. A lot of that, we don't actually care whether it's AI or model. I mean, it's then obviously I do think that Microsoft with the Azure OpenAI got an angle on Azure cloud. So that's I guess something that we are developing. And then we still have a lot of stuff that has been running on-prem. We had bespoke implementation. So I guess much of the models we've had in our risk areas, fin crime reporting, everything, all of that stuff we basically run on-prem. And I guess there's a range of tools that we do for it, but a lot of that stuff we just code ourselves. So I think if in Python you can basically do anything in Python that you can buy from these other big suppliers. It just depends on your appetite. I hope that answers it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
Cool. Nothing else. Okay. Well, thanks everybody.